for that
I
one.
was of the same mind.
Yeah.
Didn't think we had a lot to say. I was asked. to
Gratefully,
testify
we
on
didn't have a lot to say.
Bill having to do with severance taxes, but I was unable to. I had another commitment.
Okay. So yeah, that's another topic that will obviously be part of the conversation this year. So we're tracking that. You know, the commissioners will be attending more Association of Oregon Counties meetings as the legislature goes on, because that's how we generally make our voice heard at the legislature on issues that affect the county. Luckily, right now, those meetings are virtual, so we don't have the travel expense or the time required to do that, and testifying is also virtual. And I always encourage citizens, if you want to see how your legislature works, right, frankly, while there's been a lot of horrible things about COVID, there's never been a better time to watch government in action. The legislature has all of their committee hearings on the internet now, and you can watch them as they go on, and you can also testify that way, which is something previously you had to drive to Salem to do. With that, I also helped with gift card sales at the Visitor Center a couple Saturdays ago. Travel Southern Oregon Coast, of which the county is a part, as well as Coos Bay and North Bend, purchased $20 restaurant gift cards from all of the restaurants in Coos Bay and North Bend, and then sold them at $10 a piece in order to encourage people to support local restaurants. And that was a great turnout. Again, this time is the second time they've done it, and the restaurants have all expressed a lot of appreciation for that effort. So we were happy to support that through Travel Southern Oregon Coast. I've been appointed to the Coos Bay Homeless Work Group, and we had our first meeting last week covering Coos Bay's efforts of outreach to the homeless community and how they feel they can be doing better. Commissioner Main and I met with Oregon Water Resources Division last week to discuss the water rights applications that Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, I almost said Oregon Department of Forestry, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife has filed for 100 streams in Coos, Curry, and Douglas County.
South Coast.
Yeah, on the South Coast. Douglas County Commissioner Tom Kress joined us, as well as the Douglas County Planning Director and Coos County Planning Director Jill Rolfe. It was an interesting discussion because it would allow them to apply, they have the statutory right. Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife has the right to apply for in-stream water rights to protect the fish. So even though the water would still be in the stream, it would not be available for somebody if they wanted to come in and get water rights to, build a manufacturing plant or make some commercial use out of it. It still protects residential use for people that put in a residential well, but it could effectively lock up a lot of these streams to any future water rights appropriations for commercial use.
Industry.
For commercial and industrial use.
Agricultural being included in commercial.
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, anything but residential,
Mm-hmm.
domestic.
I think up to what, 4 family? If I remember right?
It would depend. I think they were talking even larger than that for certain
Okay.
developments. But yeah,
Mhm.
essentially residential use would be the only thing that would be able to still get a water right out of a lot of these streams,
Mhm.
depending on the time of year also. As a matter of fact, I think they sent us that recording. We should probably put it up on the county's website for
Mhm.
anybody who wants to
Mhm.
see it. Water Resources recorded the meeting, and so we'll get that posted.
And they provided me with some studies too,
Yeah,
which I asked for.
which were pretty long.
Yeah. But I'll talk about it a little bit.
Okay, perfect. I believe all 3 commissioners had an interview with Public Access TV, and that'll be posted. And I'll be curious to see it, because we didn't see each other. We all just recorded separately and talked about, the challenges we see to the county and opportunities going forward. So it will be interesting to see how closely aligned we are on that. And I had a Travel Southern Oregon Coast Board meeting, and we talked about some of the improvements that are going on at Whiskey Run. There's going to be a bathroom out there now at the mountain biking trails. So no need to hold it the whole time, like I'm sure everybody was doing before, waiting to get home.
Unfortunately not.
Oh, there's some people that weren't holding it. That's a surprise. And with that, I'm happy to pass it on to one of my fellow commissioners.
Joe?
I'll go ahead. Since our last meeting, we had a fair board meeting, which I'll come back to in a few minutes. I've had a couple of meetings, state level regarding the Coos, or the County Forest Trust lands, and one of the meetings had to do with the ongoing study about how those are to be managed, and with the latest version, unfortunately, being that they would take about half of those lands out of production across the state for habitat, and leaving less than half available to harvest. It's an uphill battle. It's going to be an uphill battle to get that changed, given the makeup of the Board of Forestry and the pressure that everyone's getting from environmental groups. The other County Forest Trust land meeting had to do with harvest of considerable amount of acreage, particularly in Lynn County, that got damaged by the fire. And the Oregon Department of Forestry has decided appropriately, in my view, to go ahead with harvest of those grounds. They do not have to get approval from the Board of Forestry, thank heavens, for that action, or I'm sure the board would insist that they not do it. I suspect the battle is not over yet, but they are starting with some minor salvage operations yet immediately. But the whole process that we have to go through, the state has to go through to put out sales, will delay much being done until next summer. In the meantime, the private interests that have burned forest are visibly harvesting that ground. And that's good, other than it throws more logs onto the market, which is likely to suppress some of the costs, or the price we'll get for some of our timber sales this year. I think I had something else to talk about. Well, I'll go back to fair then. It was the decision of the Fair Board to do all possible to have a fair this year. The concern is that we don't know where this COVID virus thing's going to be, and whether this will even be a fair will even be allowed by the state. So it kind of put the board into a quandary, in that they have to, if they're going to do it, if they're going to have one, they have to start making agreements with the vendors that supply certain things like the carnival rides for the fair. And so the decision was made to go ahead and make those agreements, subject to our ability to cancel them without penalty if we are not allowed by the state to have a fair. And we would have up until the end of May, the Fair Board, maybe it's the 1st of May, anyway, thought to, if we had all these pieces put together, then we could go ahead and get the fair done by the end of the summer, if we have these contracts in place.
Mm-hmm.
So a final decision will be made in May whether to hold the fair or not.
I saw the Rhododendron Festival's moving forward
So, yeah.
in May, and they'll be in May.
They'll be in May. So
Yeah.
maybe that's, but we didn't want to be in a position of contracting with the vendors for the fair and then not being able to have that for factors beyond our control, so.
No, that's very
So
responsible. I think
that's
that was a
where
good
we
way to
are
handle it.
with that. On forestry roads, Lance is considering a new approach. He still has concerns about property damage, but he believes that if we were to restrict access during dark time hours between sunset and sunrise, that in most instances, unless there's some unique circumstances like a harvest operation going on, the roads would be open in the daytime. Now, Phil, this would make it a little more difficult to spotlight deer, but the roads would be open in the daytime. So that's the current thinking. Lance is working through that, but I think he's for it.
Maybe he's wanting to spotlight the deer every night except behind the lock gate.
Well, with the rest of it, yeah, that's why it's important not to have so many people out there.
Except the deputies have keys to the gates too.
No, they can do it too, they can hunt too. So, that's all I have.
Okay. Our first budget meeting will be February 22nd in this room. February 22nd, budget starts for the county.
Not meeting.
Hmm?
Work session, not meeting.
Yeah,
It's
without
just the
the
board-
full, without the full board,
Right,
just the
the board
commissioners
commissioners
and the
decide.
departments.
Yes.
Right, right.
You want to
As,
put that on your calendar as a save the date.
yeah,
Yeah.
I got it 3 times, I think, now. As Melissa mentioned, we participated in a Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife / Oregon Water Resources Department meeting online. And they talked about wanting to take the remaining water, I think, remaining water in the streams of southwest Oregon for fish. And I asked for studies on that, and they supplied some studies. I read through several of them. One was lengthy. It appears, I'll have to read them again, but they don't have any recent studies newer than 30 years ago. They have several old studies that they're promoting, and if my memory serves me right, being here almost forever, in those years in the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s, we had more rainfall, I'll have to check it, than we do now. So it seemed like they would get a bigger allocation of water to me than would normally happen in let's say, a lesser water year. I would think they would want to use all the years to determine what amount of water they might take, rather than just my personal opinion, greater water years. Also, you may not know this, but there's been meetings going on with fishing groups and conservation groups, I'll call them, like Oregon Trout and the nature, wherever agencies they are, Trout Unlimited and native trout groups and all that sort of stuff, and native fish groups. And they have a first draft out for the South Coast Conservation Plan for ODF&W for the Fish and Wildlife Commission. And I read a little bit of it. It appears, from one person's point of view, that about 80% of the southwest of Oregon here is planned to be designated as a wild fish emphasis area. In other words, catch and release only. This means no more hatchery programs may be introduced without approval by the Fish and Wildlife Commission. In addition, it is proposed to add 2 more catch and release streams to their already list that they have. There are lots of numbers to speak of, but that's kind of the gist of the whole plan, is to have catch and release on a great number of streams in southwest Oregon. Phil?
Do you agree with that, Bob?
Well, no, I would think if there's first of all, you would need to study how many fish are coming back. I saw one of the old studies they sent me. Used to be 17,000 plus coho came back to 10 Mile. There's just maybe less than 1,000, less than 500 come back now. What happened to promoting these fish to get more fish back? We think they're going in the wrong direction. They want to conserve for wild fish only. In my opinion, there aren't really those, because we've had hatchery programs since the late 1800s on the coast of Oregon. They've been mixed up. In fact, Oregon fish are the ones that were taken to the Great Lakes, and they have amazing fishery in the Great Lakes now for salmon and steelhead. Yeah, we want to fish, no. But it seems like they're going the wrong direction. my personal opinion is that we should be raising more fish, especially for the economy and for people to keep new people getting into fishing so they actually catch something once in a while and get encouraged. It looks like some of the, quote, native fish groups have the ear of whoever's promoting this. In fact, they even have a biologist for ODF&W who's a native fish person. So,
Well, there's always been a, excuse me for interrupting you, Bob, there's always been a deal, you know, where Northwest Steelheaders making a deal with the game commission, you do this, we'll do that, they raise the fees, they get a little bit. Same way with the hunters organization, they've never represented me. I used to belong to the Steelheaders, I quit because they were then wanting to eliminate the striping bass. So, people better be leery of letting any of these guys, groups, represent the South Coast or anywhere else because they got their own motives and stuff.
now, like I said, they have this person who's the Native Fish Conservation Coordinator for ODF&W, which is interesting. It means that the native fish groups have really influenced the Fish and Wildlife Commission and the ODF&W to actually appoint a person to be in this position. Another great thing that hit me the other day from the Oregon Employment Department, which really distressed me, was that they showed for 2020, Coos County lost 1,340 jobs. I assume that's mostly because of COVID. I don't know that, but that's a lot of jobs just for little Coos County. That I receive emails back and forth quite a bit on the Elliott, and if you don't know, or I'll re-emphasize it, Coos and Douglas counties went together and proposed to the state land board that we purchase the Elliott, which we were ignored. And I got a call from the manager of BLM, Bureau of Land Management, that they're going to cut less green timber in Coos County this coming year because they're actively cutting, trying to cut in the fire areas at Douglas, Marion counties, et cetera, Eugene, Lane County, et cetera. So they're going to cut back and try and emphasize more people and more sales in the burned areas. I didn't know there was a limit, but maybe there's a limited number of people that can lay out sales. I don't know. I didn't ask.
That seems unfair to the areas and the loggers in the areas where we didn't have fire.
I know.
And the truckers and the sawmill workers.
Yep, I agree.
Plywood plant workers. It's unfortunate. The County Forest Trust lands are doing their best, and they already are, planning to make their normal level of sales in addition to the salvage stand.
Okay. And with that, you have anything else you thought of?
We have Eric Gleason on the phone from Coos Oklahoma.
Mhm.
It'd be great to have him give an update on the metrics and vaccinations.
Oh, Eric, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Did you hear Melissa?
I did. Current metrics, message came out yesterday for the 2-week look back of January 17th to January 30th, and we had a case count of 157 at a case rate of 248.1 per 100,000 and a test positivity rate of 9.8%, which keeps us at extreme for business and recreation and high for education. We had a second round for the first responder vaccinations that we did over Coos Bay Fire yesterday. We are up, I want to say, over 3,700 vaccines that have been administered to this point, and we should be somewhere near 700 that have been vaccinated completely. The supply chain is significantly slower than we had hoped, and we are trying to ensure that the community understands that we're not forgetting about groups. I know that the is coming up. The educators' date came on the 25th, and we're working diligently to get as many of the vaccines out to those groups as possible, but we have to do it within the constraints that we have regarding the number of vaccines we get, which isn't that many. So we're working with our local, in the local healthcare community to try to pool vaccines where we can so that we can start ensuring that those individuals are being vaccinated. There's also on our website vaccine interest forms that you can fill out. You can go, very first thing that pops up on the cooshealthandwellness.org website is two buttons, one for organizational and one for individual, that you can push, and you can fill out a vaccine interest, and we will actually contact you via text and email when it's time for your group to get your vaccine. So we're doing everything we can within the constraints of the supply chain. It has been a little more frustrating than I think we thought it would be, but we're doing everything we can.
Okay. Questions?
So Eric, I know some people wonder, like, do we have a lot of vaccines that you're holding there at Coos Health and Wellness? Or are you basically putting shots in arms as soon as you have the vaccine?
Basically, as soon as we know how many numbers arrive, because we can't really make any guesstimates until they actually walk through the door. We have them spoken for and in arms probably within a day. They do not last very long. I mean, this is a big deal, and we want to make sure that none get wasted, and all of those individuals that had their initial vaccine get their second, and that we're starting on those high priority groups. So they don't sit. They barely get enough time to gain icicles before we started to thaw them and get them out.
Thank you so much. Looks like.
Jack?
Now, the people that don't have the online, how are they gonna reach these people? I mean, to get set up and stuff. Hey, everybody's saying you gotta go online to make appointment, and you don't have internet or smartphone.
I would guess you would call them. Call the health department.
Eric,
They-
did you hear that question, why people don't have internet?
Yeah, what we're doing right now is that for individuals that just aren't tech savvy, they can call in, and we're working on getting some more manpower to man a vaccine part of our call tree so that we can help. But front desk and myself have answered a number of phone calls and filled that form out for them. So we are willing to help get that form filled out in the event that they don't have the capacity to do so.
And they've added extra people on the phone system too, at Coos Health and Wellness, to handle the load of people calling in. Eric, I have a question. I get these emails from Leah Horner from the governor's office, I guess, about the COVID rates, and we got one the other day that stated, it showed all the counties and their infection rates and the percentage and stuff, and I can't make the percentages work. If they said we had 157 cases for, what, 2 weeks?
Yes.
We made us at 9.8%. Well, if you take 157 times 26 weeks, half a year, in other words, every 2 weeks, and you times that by, and then divide it, you get roughly 5 to 6% infection rate, not 9.8. And then I went backwards and said, okay, if you have 9.8% times 64,487 people at the 2019 census taking, that would mean we would have affected over a year's time 6,320 people. And I'm going, well, how many did we have in 2020 in Coos County total? Do you know, remember, roughly?
How many cases?
Yeah. That
Oh.
actually confirmed cases.
Around 1,600, I think.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
how does 6,320 at 9.8%, say 10% of 64,000, 6,400, so 6,320 cases, we only had 1,600 last year, which was before we have the
Is that
vaccine.
Is that calculated as a percent of the entire population, Eric, or a percent of those tested?
Per 100,000, it says. We got
Yeah.
9.8%, so maybe
If-
if you can think
the
about
county
it.
does posit-
You may think about it and get a hold of me later, because I'm scratching my head going, the numbers don't work out the way I'm doing them anyway.
County test positivity is the number of positive tests in the 2-week period relative to the number of tests given overall, including negatives. And the number that the county or the OHA uses, we figured the other day was the 63,308.
Okay, but still, that's a whole lot less. We're having 1,600 last year. That would mean almost 6,000 some in a year, and
Bob,
that's not
I
accurate.
don't think that number has to do with how many cases we've had. It has what percentage of people that have been tested as being
Positive?
positive?
Okay, but why not, and they're promoting that as us being an extreme, why not do it as actual cases versus the population? It would show it a whole lot less, unless they're trying to incite something. Just irritates me a bit. I mean, they're playing with numbers here, in my estimation. Anyway, throw that out there. With that, we're adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
I guess we're going home.
Were they just talking about, going to Coos on the website and signing up?
Yeah, I got to wondering about this. You're going, huh.
That's what I